Picture the scariest boss you've ever had. Now picture that boss controls the weather, sits on a throne made of clouds, and can end your entire career with a single lightning bolt. That's not a bad Monday at the office. That's Tuesday on Mount Olympus. And today, you're the one who screwed up. You didn't mean to. That's the thing about angering Zeus. Nobody ever means to. You just broke a rule you didn't know existed, or told a lie you thought was harmless. Or maybe you simply existed a little too close to something he wanted for himself. The king of the gods doesn't send a strongly worded email. He doesn't put you on a performance improvement plan. He reaches for the sky itself and throws it at you. So let's set the scene. You are standing somewhere in ancient Greece. Maybe you're a king, maybe you're a shepherd. It doesn't matter, because to Zeus, everyone below Olympus looks roughly the same size. Small, breakable, and deeply overdue for a lesson in humility. Above you, the clouds are shifting. Not the normal kind of shifting, the kind where the sky itself seems to be deciding something. And somewhere behind those clouds, on a throne carved from storm and gold, Zeus is watching you. Who exactly is Zeus? Quick refresher, because this matters. Zeus is the king of the Greek gods, ruler of Olympus, god of the sky, and the guy who won a very messy family war to get there. His father, Cronus, used to swallow his own children whole out of fear one of them would overthrow him. Cronus, if you're wondering, means time, fitting since he spent so much of it trying to outrun his own downfall. Zeus was the one child who escaped, grew up in secret, came back, and forced his father to cough up his siblings, fully grown, from inside his own stomach. Then Zeus led them in a 10-year war against the old order and won. He didn't just take the throne, he rewired the entire universe around himself. So when we say Zeus is powerful, we don't mean strong for a king. We mean he is the reason storms exist. Lightning, thunder, the eagle overhead, the shifting wind before rain. The Greeks believed all of it was Zeus, personally, expressing an opinion. Now back to you. You did something. Maybe you doubted him out loud. Maybe you broke an oath sworn in his name, and oaths were sacred to Zeus, because he was also the god of hospitality and justice between people. Break a promise, and you weren't just lying to another person. You were lying in front of the sky, and the sky remembers everything. Maybe you insulted a guest in your home, which sounds small until you remember that Zeus personally protected travelers and strangers, appearing sometimes in disguise just to test whether mortals would treat him kindly. Fail that test, and you don't get a warning. You get turned into something with fewer rights and considerably less dignity. Here's a question worth sitting with. How do you even know you've angered a god before it's too late? You don't. That's the horror of it. The wind doesn't apologize before it knocks down your house. Let's walk through what actually happens next, because the myths give us a very clear playbook. First, the sky darkens, not gradually like weather, but suddenly, like a curtain being pulled. Birds go quiet. Even the animals seem to know something's wrong before you do. This is the moment where, if you had any sense, you'd start running. Most people in the myths don't. Most people freeze. The way you freeze when you realize you've said the wrong thing in a room full of people who matter. Then comes the sound. Thunder. But not the kind you're used to. The kind that feels like it's coming from directly above your specific location, personally addressed to you. The Greeks didn't experience thunder as ambient noise. They experienced it as a verdict. And then, if Zeus is truly furious, the bolt. Lightning wasn't just a weapon to the ancient Greeks. It was Zeus's signature, his fingerprint on the world, forged for him by the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants who crafted his thunderbolts as thanks for freeing them from imprisonment. Every time lightning split a tree or scorched a hillside, someone nearby was almost certainly whispering the same question: who made him angry this time? Sometimes the punishment is instant, quick, brutal, over in a flash. Pun slightly intended. But Zeus, being a god with an eternity of free time on his hands, often preferred something with a little more staying power, something poetic, something that would make an example of you for centuries. Take the story of Salmoneus, a mortal king so drunk on his own importance that he decided to impersonate Zeus. He built a bronze bridge and rode his chariot across it, dragging torches behind him to fake lightning, and had his people drag brass kettles to fake thunder. He wanted his subjects to worship him as a god. Bold move. Terrible move. Zeus, unimpressed by a knockoff performance of his own thunder, hit Salmoneus with an actual lightning bolt and erased his entire city along with him. The lesson wasn't subtle. You can admire the sky. You cannot audition to replace it. Or think about Lycaon, a king who tested Zeus by serving him a meal made of human flesh, trying to see if a god could even tell the difference. Zeus could tell, furious at the insult to hospitality and the horror of the act itself. He flipped the entire banquet table, killed Lycaon's sons, and turned Lycaon into a wolf, cursed to wander the wild for eternity, as a living warning about what happens when you test a god's patience with cruelty. The word for this kind of transformation into beast punishment even gave us a term still used today: lycanthropy. Not exactly the legacy Lycaon was hoping for. Genuinely, who looks at the literal king of the sky and thinks, you know what would go great with dinner? Human flesh served as a trap. Some people just weren't built for long-term thinking. Right. Moving on. What's fascinating, and this is the part that separates Zeus from every other angry authority figure in mythology, is how personal his punishments feel. He doesn't outsource his anger. He doesn't send a lesser god to handle it. He shows up. Sometimes literally, disguised as a beggar or a shepherd, quietly watching how you treat him before revealing exactly who he is and delivering judgment on the spot. There's a story about an old couple, Baucis and Philemon, who were the only people in their entire town willing to offer food and shelter to two disguised travelers, Zeus and his son Hermes, after every other household turned them away. As punishment for the town's cruelty, Zeus flooded the entire village, wiping it off the map. But the old couple who showed kindness? Spared, rewarded, and eventually granted their wish to die together, transformed into two intertwined trees, so neither would ever have to grieve the other. Same God, same day, total destruction on one side, quiet mercy on the other. Zeus's anger and his generosity ran on the exact same current. You just had to hope you were standing on the right side of it. So what does that tell you about angering Zeus specifically? It's never really about the sky. It's about what the sky reveals about you. Zeus's punishments consistently target the same handful of sins: arrogance dressed up as confidence, cruelty disguised as tradition, and broken promises treated as harmless. Now here's the twist most people miss when they picture Zeus as some furious, trigger-happy tyrant hurling bolts at anyone who annoys him. The myths actually show something a little more complicated. Zeus doesn't punish randomly. He punishes hypocrisy. He punishes people who claim to deserve respect while treating others without any. Salmoneus wanted the worship without the responsibility. Lycaon wanted to expose a god's ignorance while committing an atrocity. The entire town that turned away travelers wanted comfort without kindness, which raises an uncomfortable question for you. Watching all this unfold from your very small, very mortal spot on the ground, if the king of Olympus judged your life today, which side of the storm would you be standing on? Let's talk about the punishments themselves for a second, because Zeus's imagination for consequences was frankly unmatched in the ancient world. He didn't just kill people who crossed him, he designed punishments that lasted. Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, wasn't simply struck down. Zeus had him chained to a mountain, where an eagle would arrive every single day to eat his liver, an organ the Greeks believed regenerated overnight, meaning the torment reset every morning forever. It's the kind of sentence you design when killing someone feels too merciful. Or consider Ixion, a king who Zeus actually forgave for one crime and invited up to Olympus as a guest, only for Ixion to repay that kindness by trying to seduce Zeus's own wife, Hera. Zeus's response was almost theatrical in its cruelty. He tricked Ixion into sleeping with a cloud shaped like Hera, then bound him to a flaming wheel that spun through the sky forever. You get the sense, reading these stories back to back, that Zeus didn't just want obedience. He wanted the punishment to become the story people told their children for the next 1,000 years. Honestly, at what point does eternal flaming wheel stop being justice and start being a really elaborate way of saying, I never forget? Because Zeus clearly never forgot. And that's the real through line. Zeus's anger isn't chaotic, it's memory made visible. Every myth about angering him is really a myth about consequences catching up to people who assumed they were untouchable. Kings who thought their crowns made them equal to gods. Mortals who thought cleverness could outrun justice. Entire towns that thought cruelty was invisible as long as no one important was watching. Except someone was always watching. That was the entire point of Zeus's disguises, his sudden storms, his uncanny habit of showing up exactly when someone thought they'd gotten away with something. The ancient Greeks built an entire moral universe around one unsettling idea. The sky has an opinion about how you treat people, and eventually, it tells you what that opinion is. So let's bring it back to you, standing under that darkening sky from the beginning of the story. Maybe you're not a king who insulted a god. Maybe you're just someone who's cut corners, broken a promise you thought didn't matter, treated someone smaller than you with a little less respect than they deserved because you assumed no one was keeping score. The Greeks would tell you, someone always is. You don't need a thunderbolt to understand what Zeus's myths are really about. You need to look at the pattern. The people who fell hardest were the ones who confused power for permission. The people who were spared, even rewarded, were the ones who stayed kind when kindness cost them something. That's the twist hiding underneath 2,500 years of thunder and lightning. Zeus was never really the villain of these stories. He was the consequence. The storm was never random. It was always, in some strange and ancient way, a mirror, showing mortals exactly who they'd already chosen to become, long before the sky ever noticed. So go back to that scene at the very start. Imagine the biggest boss in the room, the one who controls not just your career, but the actual weather, watching you from behind the clouds. Except this was never really about Zeus deciding your fate at random. It was about him finally showing you the fate you'd already written for yourself.